Welcome to Founder Tactics, a podcast about entrepreneurs and the communities that shape them. I am your host, Julia Lucidi. Today I'm sitting down with a legend in the world of entrepreneurship, Linda Rottenberg, co-founder and CEO of Endeavor, the global organization that has redefined what it means to build and support high-impact entrepreneurs, especially in emerging markets. Linda was named an innovator for the 21st century by Time and the world's mentor capitalist by Tom Friedman. She has spent nearly 3 decades unlocking the potential of founders across 45 countries. Under her leadership, Endeavor has helped scale over 3,000 companies, including 85 unicorns in the network, creating 4 million jobs, and launched a co-investment fund that manages $540 million in assets. But this conversation goes way deeper than just business metrics. We talked about the early days of building Endeavor, the personal growth that came from her founder journey, down to the driving force behind her vision and success throughout these years. If there's any organization that has taught me the power of community, it's Endeavor. You'll hear more about that on the podcast. But before we dive in, I'm so thankful that you tuned in to join us and want to stay connected. So please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast on whichever platform you're listening to us on now. By subscribing, you'll be the first one to find out about our new episode releases, and you'll be helping our podcast grow. If you're an entrepreneur in the Endeavor Network and you'd like to be featured on the podcast, you can email us at hello@foundertactics.com. We'll have all the details in the episode description as well. Now, without any further ado, let's dive in. All right. Welcome to the podcast, Linda.
It's great to be here.
So happy to have you here. It's an honor.
It's been a journey to get here, but we are here.
But as two entrepreneurs, we're laser focused on getting things done. So we made it happen. I do want to share one, personal thing before we get started. Endeavor had such a tremendous impact on my life. And it's not just my life, but I hear this from so many other people who worked at Endeavor, particularly Endeavor Brazil, because that's where I spent my time. It was one of the most formative experiences of my life. And I think that it's really difficult to come across that kind of experience in life. And not that it was easy, it was actually really tough, but it shaped me into the professional that I am today. Truly.
I love hearing that. And we have such extraordinary alumni around the world and who are all, they're entrepreneurs themselves or people who stay in that entrepreneur support ecosystem. So
Yes.
it's always amazing for me to re-meet people who've come. We have once Endeavor, always Endeavor.
That's what we always say. And honestly, people who I worked with at Endeavor, we stayed connected. They are people who I still reach out to. They are people who mentor me in my business that I always have open doors with. During the Endeavor Brazil 25-year reunion, we had a alumni reunion the weekend prior, and we had a cookout. There was 70 people there.
Wow.
And
I love that.
We were just all sharing about how none of us quite had the same experience ever again. It was just this magical season for us that shaped us and became a foundation for what we would all build after that. And I guess at times I've wondered how much you might know about that, right? About that experience that we've had as team members of Endeavor, and how much it's impacted us.
That makes me so happy. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also I read your book, Crazy is a Compliment, and I loved it. It was so encouraging, just in moments where, as a founder building by myself and, you have ups and downs, it was a really nice comfort to just tune into an audiobook and hear from another founder and be encouraged.
Well, I love that. And, it's funny because I had the opportunity to have, let's face it, it wasn't going to be an A-list celebrity, but let's call it a B-minus list celebrity, read the audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
And many people take them up on the publishers up on that offer because it's difficult to go in a studio. You're a professional now, but you have to go and your P's are wrong. And so you have to do the whole chapter over again. And it was really important to me that it to be my voice.
Yeah.
Because I said, I wrote this as if I were in the room with founders,
Yes.
with, entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, and I wanted them to hear my voice.
Yeah.
So I love that you said that.
Well, as soon as I turned it on, it was the first thing that crossed my mind. I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad she recorded in her voice." Because I have a hard time sometimes listening to audiobooks. They just feel a little bit mechanical.
Yeah.
But because it's you, it carried like the whole like emotion and experience of what you were saying, and it just made it captivating.
I love that. Well, the book came out in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's 2025. I have no plans to write a second book. I'm married to an author. He's about to publish his 16th book. I say I'm one and done, but
Yeah.
never say never. But one of the newer Endeavor entrepreneurs is Mati Stanishevsky, who's the founder of 11 Labs, which is the top AI voice company in the world.
Oh.
So one of the things I'm going to be doing in September is recording my voice for 11 Labs AI. So
Very
we'll see.
cool.
Maybe I won't even have to go into the recording studio next time.
So for people who are listening who haven't met you yet, would you mind doing a brief introduction on who you are and what do you do?
Sure. I'm Linda Rottenberg, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Endeavor. Endeavor is now what we call a global network of trust of by and for entrepreneurs. Back 27 years ago, when we started, Endeavor really set out to identify and support entrepreneurs based in emerging and growth markets who were not getting the attention, the networks, the capital we felt they deserved because they weren't setting up in Silicon Valley.
Right.
And even today, it's so interesting. We talk at Endeavor about the power of elsewhere and all of this innovation happening really everywhere. But we say elsewhere because if you're not today building in Silicon Valley in China, 27 years later, people are back to saying if you're doing AI, you can't succeed. And we just think that that's not true. And so Endeavor really set out to put these entrepreneurs on the map, to give them the supports to grow their companies, to scale their companies, and then a platform to pay their success forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and you guys are doing incredible work, present in 45 countries, having tremendous impact, generating so many economic opportunities, job creation, and really pairing these founders with other more experienced mentors who can advise them and help them grow.
Yeah. So as you said, so we're in 45 countries, a plan to support entrepreneurs in 100 countries. We've screened probably now over 60,000 companies to work with, just under 3,000. Last year, they generated $88.5 billion in revenue and over 4 million jobs.
Yeah.
We have over 85 unicorns in the network, meaning companies that have grown up to be the billion-dollar-plus companies that are now really on the national and in some cases international roadmaps.
Yeah.
And we also have a co-investment fund as side by side. So we have the nonprofit ecosystem builder and the for-profit fund that today manages $540 million in assets.
Yeah, that's super impressive. And so you started Endeavor in your late 20s.
I did.
Which is really impressive. Did you already have like clarity on the vision of what it would become?
No, I joke that I started Endeavor to escape the law. And what I mean by that, I was a sort of fugitive of sorts, but I had grown up in Massachusetts, had gone straight through to college. I went to college at Harvard. I went to Yale Law School.
Mm-hmm.
And I was literally the only one in my class that didn't have the next 3 years of their lives set.
Mm-hmm.
They were going to a law firm, or they were going to Goldman Sachs, or they were going to clerk for a justice on the Supreme Court and then go to something else. And I had no idea. All I knew is I didn't want to practice the law. And so professors took pity on me, sent me down to Latin America. And so I was working on a number of different projects in Latin America in the mid-90s and realized that no one was starting a business. And here it was the time of Yahoo and Netscape and Steve Jobs going back to Apple. And I thought, where are the entrepreneurs? And one day, I tell this story a lot, but one day I was in Buenos Aires in a taxi and realized my driver had an engineering degree. So I thought, why aren't you a, and I could not think of the word, and neither could he. He kept saying empresario, and I said, no, it's empresario. It's not some big businessman with Swiss bank accounts and government connections. It's an innovator. And he said, we don't have a word like that here. And that was my aha moment. Like, oh my God, if you can't even go back home and tell your parents what you want to be, no wonder no one was starting a company. And that really gave rise to this crazy idea. People called me Chica Loca for about a decade. That's why crazy as a compliment emerged.
Yes.
And we set out to prove them wrong. We set out to say, hey, look, we're going to prove that there are entrepreneurs in these markets worthy of growth, worthy of support, worthy of capital. And one of my favorite moments, I know you worked for Endeavor Brazil, came about 5 years later when the editor of Aurelios, the Brazilian dictionary, Portuguese dictionary, called up our team and said they were adding the words empreendedor and empreendedorismo, entrepreneur and entrepreneurship, into the lexicon, in part because of Endeavor's work.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So back then when you started Endeavor, you just wanted to kind of create a cultural shift. From what I hear from you saying, right? You didn't yet realize what it would come to be as a whole. Is that right?
Yeah, well, there are elements that to this day remain the same. And that's in some ways the most surprising thing. We said, okay, we're starting in Latin America, but we want it to be global, which it is. We said that there's going to be more in common. I talked about forget B2B and B2C, business to business and business to consumer. I said from really day one, it's E to E. It's emerging market to emerging market. That is true more than ever, where we see people from the Middle East going to Southeast Asia, from Africa going to Latin America, and from Eastern Europe, right? So there's so much. So that we always had in mind. We always had in mind there was going to be a selection process to identify the most promising entrepreneurs. That has really stayed the same. And we always said we were going to create this full circle where we would mentor and support these entrepreneurs. We didn't initially have a fund, but we would mentor. Tom Friedman called us the mentor capitalists. So we always said we're going to mentor the entrepreneurs. And then we said there was going to be a mechanism for them to pay their success forward. So I think today the things that are different are the addition of the fund to make Endeavor self-sustaining and to add capital into the ecosystem. And we really now talk about the multiplier effect. We're actually quantifying how mentorship and reinvestment and training of the next generation, you can actually quantify how big an ecosystem can grow. So those are some of the things that are different. And obviously we didn't know new technologies, quantum and AI. But apart from that, the vision weirdly is very similar to what it was initially.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I love that side of Endeavor, that there's the policy and research to really back up a lot of the decisions that not only Endeavor is making, but ecosystems as a whole are making. So I love that component. So one thing that really impresses me about your journey is just how you've been able to get in front of very big names and garner support early on. I would say that Endeavor today has a very strong reputation, but in the beginning of the journey, you were building something from scratch where people were thinking like, what's Endeavor and who is Linda, and still building that reputation, right? And to name a couple names of folks in your network and who have been supporters, Michael Dell, Reid Hoffman, Eduardo Elstein from Argentina's largest real estate developer, Jorge Paulo Lemann, one of the owners of 3G Capital in Brazil. What do you believe moved these people to support you early on?
Yeah, I always say that stalking is an underrated startup strategy. And at the beginning, when you had nothing to lose, I mean, I just felt so passionate about what I was doing. But you mentioned one of the people, I'll mention a couple of them, but
Sure.
Eduardo was one of the earliest people I met because no one thought there were entrepreneurs in these markets. And one day there had been a New York Times piece about the fact that he had invested George Soros's money, making George Soros technically the largest real estate owner in Argentina, but through Eduardo. And I somehow got a 10-minute meeting on a Friday, knowing, so it's the app Friday afternoon. Eduardo happens to be an Orthodox Jewish man, so I knew he was going home for Shabbat. So I knew this was only lasting 10 minutes. And 5 minutes into our conversation, he looks at his watch and says, I get it. You want an intro to George Soros. This was in Buenos Aires at his headquarters.
Yes.
And he said, I'll see what I can do. And I said, no, Eduardo, I'm an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur. This is an organization of by for entrepreneurs. I want your passion, your involvement, and $200,000. And he looks at his right-hand guy. He's like, esta chica está loca. And he basically says, wait a minute, I thought, like, what happened? I thought she was so charming, and now it's like you're in a bad movie where she's stabbing you with a knife. And I said, Eduardo, estoy decepcionada. I'm disappointed. This from the guy who famously walked into Soros's office and came out with a $10 million check. You're lucky I asked you for only $200,000.
Right.
And he walked out the door. And I thought, uh-oh, I've just insulted him. He's just walked out.
Yeah.
He's leaving to get home.
Yeah.
And the right-hand guy looks at me like, I don't know what to do. And before I stood up to leave, Eduardo walked back in with his checkbook and wrote the $200,000 on the spot.
That's incredible.
And it was that move and the fact that we set up in Argentina that Jorge Paulo and Beto of 3G, who had met another mentor of mine, Bill Salmon at Harvard Business School, who had gotten to know Endeavor, and they said they wanted to support entrepreneurs in Brazil. They were funding scholarships for people in Brazil and frustrated that the people were just becoming investment bankers. And so they wanted, and so Bill had said, go meet Linda and you should bring Endeavor's model to Brazil. So the fact that it had worked in Argentina, then brought it to Brazil, we were then called in by the who's who of Mexico. But what's interesting is this is for founders, cross-border. You don't have to have the connections yourself, but you have to have that authentic belief that what you're doing is solving a pain point or problem that other people want solved.
Yeah. No, that's good. And did you already have like a strong pitch? Do you feel like you were refining that pitch on the go?
Totally refining on the go. Yeah, totally. No, and then also, for better or for worse, I'm not a political person, as Connor, who is here, who worked at the White House, knows.
Right.
And so one of the funny things that happened is after we went to Argentina and Brazil, again, this was going to be global in our minds, but we just had to start in Latin America.
Yeah.
I got a call from Pedro Aspe, who was the former finance minister of Mexico, and then was starting the first private equity firm in the country. He said, Linda, I'd like you to come meet a group of people we've assembled to talk about Endeavor because I think Mexico might be a good place for it. I said, great. So I got on the plane, and before I walked in the room, someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, do you know what percentage of Mexico's GDP is in that room? And I said, no, I don't think I want to. And it was the founder of the head of Cemex and the head of Televisa and the Carlos Slim, who owned half the country. And it was this impressive group.
Yeah.
And they basically said, we want to know, why are there entrepreneurs coming out of Brazil and Argentina and even Uruguay, where Endeavor had presence?
Yep.
And what's wrong with Mexico? So I said to them, well, and I tried not to look at Carlos Slim, but I said, here in Mexico, you are the big fish, and you've got to think of entrepreneurs as the little fish. And in Mexico, the big fish tend to eat the little fish.
Right.
And I thought I was going to be kicked out. This is the story of my life. And instead, Pedro mentioned for me to keep going. And I said, so why don't you think of Endeavor like an aquarium where the big fish learn to feed the little fish?
Right.
And again, to my shock, and I said it with a kind of wink, but they could have gotten insulted, kicked me out and said, go back home to, New York, kid. And instead they said, all right, we're gonna all support this. And a decade later, Emilio Escarga, who ran at that point the largest media company, Televisa, had a magazine called Expansión, and that was dedicated to business and entrepreneurship. They had a 10-page spread 10 years into Endeavor Mexico. And the cover story was Big Fish Feeding the Little Fish.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, there's like power in storytelling. It's really, really important. And I see that not only in your story, but just like Endeavor in general, how you've been able to build so much by leveraging this vision and getting people to buy in with the story.
And getting people, Endeavor really is the story of co-creation, right? And it is the story, and it has been a partnership with these big business leaders. And now we always had the other dream of by 4 entrepreneurs that the entrepreneurs would take over. And we have 50 of our top entrepreneurs serving as board members in our local offices.
Incredible.
And, we had Sergio Furio of Creditas, the outgoing president of Endeavor Brazil, handing it over to Cesar Carvalho of Buell Hub, Gympass, another Endeavor entrepreneur, as president of the board. And we have presidents, about 6 or 7 Endeavor entrepreneurs presidents. But I will say, I want to give credit to the big fish, to these big business leaders who, to their credit, wanted to do something for their economies and said, you know what, entrepreneurship, is it, even if they themselves might be disrupted, even if innovation was going to challenge the traditional businesses and that they were going to have to grow the pie.
Yeah.
But if you think about one of the challenges of emerging markets is that the top 10 families controlled so much of the access to capital, to information, to networks. And I just find it astounding. And it's really, as I said, a testament to these people in so many markets. This is true in Turkey and the Philippines and Indonesia and South Africa and all of our countries, that they were willing to even potentially give up some of the control, some of the power to grow the pie and to put their countries on the map.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in this process, over the many of years that you've had, have there been mentors that supported you through different challenges?
Absolutely. And it's interesting. One of the early mentors I had, who's no longer living, but was the great Peter Brook. And Peter Brook, whom I also stalked.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. But he founded TA Associates and Advent International. He is considered among the founding fathers of international venture capital.
Oh, amazing.
And was this sort of very Boston Brahmin. And here I am, even though I grew up in Boston, I am much more, chicaloca and overwhelming. And we have very different personalities, but I learned so much from him. And he loved, and this is I think the truth of mentorship is it's often also reverse mentorship. While he gave me legitimacy and helped me understand how do you build a franchise of venture capital or entrepreneurship support in all these markets, which TA and Advent has done, but he credited me with reminding him what his roots had been and that he was getting frustrated that his organizations were becoming too down the private equity line and not in the VC close to entrepreneur roots that they had.
Yeah.
And he sort of started shaking them up and being a little bit more agile as a result. And I think that that's really been true all along, that I started out with mentors who were older and wiser than I was. I mean, people like George Apollo and Bill Salmon that I mentioned. And yet now the opposite is true, right? When I see these entrepreneurs coming up in their 20s and I'm technically there to mentor them, but inevitably they're mentoring me.
Yeah. I work with student volunteers. So I host the Fort Lauderdale Tech Meetup once a month. We have about 200 guests that come. And I work with 10 student volunteers at every meetup. And they volunteer their time. And afterwards, I take them out for pizza and mentoring. So I give them advice on their career. Sometimes I bring an awesome professional with me, and they love it. And inevitably, over the past 2 years, I've had to make some difficult decisions with the company, with the way we build the meetup. I had to start charging. It was free for a long time, and we transitioned into charging. And, there were moments where I was out there with them doing pizza and mentoring. Maybe we were just having some talks over dinner, and I couldn't kind of hide the difficulty that I was going through. You know what I mean? Of making a really hard decision. And I was like, oh man, do I hold this back from them? Or do I include them in this? And I just opened up to them. And I said, I'm making this decision. It feels really scary. But I know that it's the right thing to do right now, which at that moment was to transition to charging. They were so encouraging. And mind you, some of them are dual enrolled high school, college. So they're high school students. They're 16, 17, 18, up to 21. And they told me, you know what? I think we're going to attract higher quality people, because if people are spending their money
skin in the game,
they're going to be more intentional, and, it's going to work great. We're going to explain, we're going to, be super hospitality oriented. And I was like, okay, like we'll do it. And some of them were like, oh my gosh, you're so bold. I can't believe you're doing this. They were excited to be on that journey with me. And they were right, and I was just so encouraged to see that, I should be listening to them as well. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter that they're younger, that they have less experience in the market. They have valid contributions to add. And so in a sense, yes, I'm there mentoring them, but a lot of ways they are also pouring back into me.
Yeah. I think the other takeaway I have that reminds me of something, one of the biggest lessons of my own journey is that as leaders, and I would say particularly as women leaders, we are told to be, tough and invincible
Mm.
and superhuman and not show our vulnerability. And a story I tell because it was deeply personal was uh, in 2008. So this is a decade into the journey. I had identical twins born in 2005. 2008, so my girls are 3, and my husband got diagnosed with an aggressive form of bone cancer.
Wow.
And
So sorry.
he
recovered.
he did recover, thankfully, but
Yeah.
it was really
Tough
it was a
journey.
grueling year. It was the lost year, which is better than the lost life, as he would say, but it was a lost year. And I had to accompany him to every chemo treatment. He had really the only second time in the world that his femur, the surgery that's now considered standard, but was pioneering at that point. He had his entire femur removed, a titanium rod put in, the femur attached, more chemo. It was a lot. And I had these young girls, and so I really was not very present. And this was before the Zoom, so before the idea of remote work. So,
Yeah.
and when I came back, I said, okay, I am not going to let them see me cry. I'm not going to, get emotional. I'll freak them out. Here I am coming back. They're probably anxious, my team. And of course, within the first 5 minutes, I broke down.
It's like, I'm not going to cry. Like,
Yeah, it never works. So I literally, after that meeting, slinked away to my office, and I was thinking, oh my God, what have I done? Like, my team is going to be freaked out. And instead, 2 younger employees knocked on my door. I let them in, and they said, we just wanted to say thank you for showing us your authentic self. And we had always thought you were kind of superhuman in kind of an unrelatable way. And they said, now that you've shown us your vulnerable side, we'll follow you anywhere. And so the lesson I said, which we are not taught, is less super, more human.
Right.
And I think that that's what those students were telling you, is that they're hungry for people who are authentic, who are showing the struggles, right? And I think especially in today with this Instagram world where everyone shows their perfect sides, it is becoming rarer and rarer for people to say, hey, no, this is who I am, not in a performative way, but in a, let me bring you into what's really going on.
Do you feel like that is still a continuous process, even though it was many years ago? Your girls are now 20, right?
Yes.
So it's been many years since that original kind of moment of clarity that you had about the importance of vulnerability. Do you feel like it's something that's kind of ongoing, and
100%.
like what's the journey? Because I'm there, you know what I mean? Especially as a new entrepreneur, starting a podcast, putting my voice out there, I'm really figuring out, what does authenticity look like for me behind a microphone?
Well, you put in the work. So in the last year, I put together what we're calling Vision 2035. And I had set a goal that we've surpassed, and to deliver this vision to 1,000 people in the network. And people thought, again, this is crazy, Linda. This is crazy. I said, well, look, I have to do this because I have to set the framework for where we're going and get people, excited, and then we can build a strategy around it. And I know we have 45 countries, but we have to be rowing in the same boat.
Yeah.
But in that process, I said, I'm going to be open about what I know we're going to do, what I hope we're going to do, and what I'm terrified that we won't be able to do, or the challenges that we're going to face internally and externally. And I think people really appreciated that. And coming with a framework, coming with thought, not just doing a dump of emotional,
Right. Like throwing
trauma.
spaghetti to the wall.
Correct. But that within that, I was saying, okay, here's where I'm personally scared. Like, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know. Here's where I need your help. Here's where, what do you think? Let's co-create this. I think that's the other thing. Giving people, especially with a company, the opportunity to co-create is something that people really appreciate and rarely ever get the chance to be part of.
Do you struggle with self-doubt or anxiety or any, fear in the process?
I think, it's funny because Connor, who's my amazing new chief of staff who you met, is here. And there was a time, even a couple weeks ago, I was like, Connor, I rarely say this, like, I am over my ski. I'm like, I am done. I am like at my limit. I have not had a break. I have to replenish, or I feel like I'm not able to
Yeah,
be
you're
myself,
not
to be
giving
my
your
best.
best.
I'm not giving my best. I mean, I'm someone who, I then went away for like a long weekend, and I came back. I was like, okay, that works for me. Like, you have to know yourself too. I think there's that works for me. I actually am someone, I just need a little bit of time. What I started doing is I said, I'm going to take a walk every day. I'm going to not do everything on Zoom. I realized I was doing so much on Zoom and then rushing to the office. Physically, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of a change up of, no, I'm going to take a walk, and I'm going to do that every day. My girls who were home for the summer, I said, I'm making them breakfast every morning. I'm going to be home in the evening. I will time shift. And so I think that that's okay. I think being able to tell people as a leader, well, what you need, but then giving them that same opportunity.
Yeah.
I think that as long as you're consistent, and for some people, I have a colleague who needs to take 3 weeks and be off and not answer any email or anything. And he runs our fund. He's an important person here.
Yeah,
I'm like, all right, that's what Alan needs. That would drive me crazy. To come back and have 300, 3,000 emails probably. No, that would stress me out. So I'm someone who needs like an hour a day, but I think that that's what you have to do. That's on a daily basis. On a larger basis, I think that finding people who are not your investors, who are not your employees as well, to test out the scary things is often helpful.
Yeah.
Because you need someone who's going to give you advice and not have their own, interests affected.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing, is test things out on people who can be objective, and then talk to your employees, your board members.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Usually that's my husband. So I say, in my opinion, the building a company is one of the biggest self-development projects, like as far as like how it pushes you in every aspect of your life, emotionally, physically, mentally. What about, building Endeavor has changed you and shaped you?
Well, one of the things is we gather the top 10% of Endeavor entrepreneurs. We call them our outliers every year. So it's about 200 entrepreneurs. We held it in Portugal, on the beautiful Comporta, in Portugal. And these are the top entrepreneurs. And I thought, all right, they're just going to be talking about how do I IPO, or how do I do M&A, or how do I, expand to this market. It was all personal.
Really?
All issues of, okay, I'm exhausted. How do I be a parent? How do I be a good partner? I'm really scared. Like, I am having mental health challenges, and I don't know what to do because I don't want to scare off my employees. I'm burnt out. My health has suffered.
Yeah.
How do I put me first? And it was so liberating and validating that you're not alone. So I think that's the thing I would say. And one of the things I'm most proud of that is the brainchild of Sylvia, our chief marketing officer, is something called Endeavor Untold. And what Sylvia is doing is getting Endeavor founders to open up about their most challenging moments.
Yeah.
Their mental health struggles, their struggles with founders who have had, substance abuse issues, or who have had cancer, or family issues that have gotten, been impacted or impacted their
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
And these are things you just never hear about. And so to your question, I would say we all go through these moments of self-doubt. We
Mm.
all go through these physical, emotional, psychological struggles.
Yeah.
And I think the more that entrepreneurs, founders can talk to one another, they'll realize they're not alone.
Yeah. It seems like sometimes that part of the conversation gets isolated. Like, let's just talk about business. So it's so refreshing to hear that, with the internal conversations that you guys are having with entrepreneurs, like these topics are surfacing. And it's so important to build a sustainable business, to have a sustainable life, and to
Yeah.
actually experience joy, right? Like, not everything is about exclusively work. Like, there's your family and there's so much more than that, right?
Yes, and also, I from the beginning with Endeavor, one of the things that led me to write Crazy as a Compliment is I started getting frustrated that all of the conversations around entrepreneurship were about product market fit and finances and the cap table. And Ben Horowitz of Andreessen Horowitz wrote a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And I said, well, I want to write the hard thing about soft things because I look at the cap tables and those are people problems. And I can tell them they need to fire their brother-in-law and their mother's on the cap table. This is a problem. And the early investor is not aligned. And so many of the issues of scale are people problems. And even now, it was so interesting at this Outliers event in Comporta, Portugal. This is April. What's everyone talking about? AI.
Mhm.
And I knew everything was going to be about AI, and yet not the way I thought. In fact, many of the conversations were the human aspects of, oh my God, how do I communicate? My team is freaking out.
Mhm.
How do I do some of these necessary layoffs or cuts while I need to empower the superstars? I don't know what to do. They're human problems. They're soft problems. They're people problems.
Yeah.
This is why many companies make it or break it. And yet we end up only talking about products, finance, the things that are, quote, serious, which I think is backwards.
Yeah. Whenever I started my entrepreneurial journey, it was actually a really spiritual process for me because I was so afraid. And I never actually imagined that I would step into entrepreneurship until it was the only option. And so I did. And it literally brought me to my knees because I was so afraid to do it alone. I got on my knees and I prayed and I said, God, will you be my co-founder? And the reason why I prayed it was because I had had several different co-founder conversations. We know those are complicated.
Very complicated.
And I just didn't feel the confidence to really lock down on any particular partnership. And I just thought to myself, I can't do this alone.
Yeah.
How am I going to do this alone? This is crazy. There's so much I don't know. And when I prayed that, I just felt like this sense of relief. I didn't know what exactly that meant. I joke around with my husband now that God took the chief marketing officer role because our events have blown up and I've maybe spent $100 in ad spend in almost 3 years. It's all been organic growth. And so it has brought me into a deeper relationship with my faith. And I'm curious to know, has faith played a role for you at all in your journey? Or how, is there a spiritual aspect to the way that you view life?
So interesting. And it's interesting as my husband has written a number of books more on the journeying side, but one of his books was called Walking the Bible, to actually go to the ancient places and see if they exist. I think for me, the importance actually is getting people of so many different faiths in a moment where that is really challenging. And I'm so proud of the fact that we're operating, throughout the Middle East and throughout Southeast Asia and Africa and Latin America and Europe. And we have people of so many backgrounds and beliefs. And I think today we are so siloed. And I think Endeavor being a safe space where, regardless of your background, regardless of your religion, regardless of your political beliefs, you can come together and know these are your people and they've got your back. And that's what matters, and we're building a better future together.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I hold on to.
I love that. That's great. So after almost 30 years leading the business, what
Yeah,
still
I was
drives
5.
you to today? Huh?
I was 5 when I started.
What still drives you today? Like what really, makes you wake up in the morning and have this energy that you have and passion that you have
Yeah.
to really drive forth the vision of this business?
Well, I think there are a few things. It's funny because I don't have as much fun when everyone thinks what we're doing is cool and obvious. And in 2021, there was a blip when SoftBank and Tiger and everyone and their mother was investing in our markets. And I thought, oh boy, maybe are we done? And we were not done. And yet now we certainly are not done. And I kind of love the fact that today I'm on a lot of panels and people are saying, well, in AI, you have to be in Silicon Valley or China or you're nothing. And I'm about to moderate a panel in Athens, right at the slopes of the Acropolis, moderate a conversation between Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis and the founder of Google DeepMind, Demis Hassabis, who rebuffed his initial investors' plea to move to Silicon Valley, and he stayed in London. And Athens is becoming an innovation center. Endeavor Greece is partnering a lot with the Prime Minister's office there, and to promote this concept of elsewhere. So I really feel like there's still a voice for Endeavor to talk about innovation elsewhere.
Yes.
And right, that's still important. The idea of the Endeavor multiplier effect is something I feel passionately about because while back to what's always been talked about, I have no problem when we're proud of the unicorns in our network. But we think, why is valuation the end goal or exit? It really is building ecosystems. It really is saying, we talk about the bubbles of influence growing because we map out different bubbles in our multiplier system maps. And the more you mentor, the more you train, the more you invest in, the more you inspire the next generation, the bigger your bubble grows. So we talk about, you want a big bubble, not just the big bank account. And I think using and quantifying this, paying it forward through this multiplier effect is very important to us to change the language of success.
Yes.
And then the third and final thing that keeps me motivated is that the idea of Endeavor Catalyst is that we're not just making great returns for LPs who can co-invest in these opportunities around the world, but half the proceeds go to Endeavor and to make the nonprofit side of Endeavor self-sustaining.
Yes.
And to me, that's where we ourselves are pioneers. And we have universities coming to us saying, hey, wait a minute, we need to look at this model too. And I think this idea of public-private partnerships and hybrid models are going to need to take root. And so that brings me joy.
Yeah. So 2 things. One is Endeavor aligning the financial model with the fund, which I think it's such a good thing for ecosystems, for Endeavor, because it allows for you to align your goals with who is most aligned with you, with entrepreneurs.
Yes.
So I think that's so valuable. It's such a big game changer because, where the funding is coming from does impact, what you focus on, or, the direction and growth can be either maybe, slowed a bit or maybe not go super in the direction that you want it. So I think that's a massive shift of synergy for Endeavor to have aligned in that way. And then the other thing that I wanted to touch a little bit more into is the multiplier effect. So when we talk about the multiplier effect, let's unpack this a little bit, because I think this is so much Endeavor's world that we really know what we're talking about in this conversation. But a lot of people who are not a part of Endeavor maybe don't realize the importance and the impact of entrepreneurs paying it forward with their time, with their expertise, with their money. Even with what I'm building with Founder Tactics, with the podcast, with the events that we do, it's really with the focus of strengthening tech communities, strengthening the founder community. And I sell this vision to everybody who I invite to either come on the podcast or speak at the tech meetup. Yeah. Maybe they're a really high level entrepreneur and they don't have a ton of time. I'm like, look, this is actually really important for you to be a part of our community in this capacity. Like, I'll work around your schedule. I'll fly to New York twice. How can we, let me gather my thoughts again, like the importance of transmitting this message to entrepreneurs who are ahead of the game.
Yes, and I think we take for granted here that there will be support. One of the benefits of entrepreneurship in the United States being synonymous with Silicon Valley is that Silicon Valley is known to promote networking and
Mm,
to promote investing in the next people. Even people talk about the PayPal mafia. This is something we talk about. Mafia as an endeavor because of
yeah.
the PayPal mafia, which is the group of people who came out of PayPal, including from Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and Reid Hoffman and David Sachs and so many people who have gone on to become some of the lead investors and entrepreneurs in other companies, all came out of this same experience and invested in one another and supported one another. And it seems so obvious here, and yet it's
Mm,
not typically the case in these markets. So I remember in the mid 2000s, Reid Hoffman, who's on my board, asking Endeavor entrepreneurs, how many of you, if your company failed on a Tuesday, would go home to the equivalent of American Thanksgiving in your markets on Thursday? How many of you would show up? And more than half the room, the hands did not go up.
mm,
And he said, of those of you who would show up, how many of you would ask for money for your next company? 0 hands were raised. He said, this is the difference. In Silicon Valley, everyone's hands would have stayed up for both questions.
mm.
So I think that, and there are some of our markets where actually you can go to jail for bankrupting a company, right?
Mhm.
And the last thing you're going to do is have failure be tied to investing. And
Right.
what's interesting is
Mm.
now we talk about the Rappi mafias, the Kareem mafias, these companies, and people are seeding the ecosystems. And by the way, these are not necessarily the hugest. I mean, Kareem was a very large exit because it sold to Uber,
Mhm.
but they had originally planned to IPO. Rappi has not exited yet.
Mhm.
And yet, what's so amazing is they have trained the next generation who's getting smarter and seeing how things had been done for good and for bad.
Yeah.
And the other story I tell, which is really the antithesis of Silicon Valley, is close to where I grew up in Boston on Route 128.
Right.
And when I say to people, well, do you want to be Silicon Valley Route 128? Everyone's like, well, what's Route 128? I'm like, yeah, exactly. That's the point. The story of Route 128 is that in the 1980s,
Mhm.
most of the tech workers were on a strip that was, near Harvard,
Mhm.
near MIT, near, you had DEC, and you had some of the early computer tech and tech servicing companies. And it really is where entrepreneurship should be known. So Stanford was still like, coming up. There was just
Right.
not that much happening in California. And there was
Mhm.
so much happening in the Boston corridor.
Wow.
And what happened was these early tech companies forbade networking.
Mhm.
They made you sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and non-competes when
Mhm.
you left.
Yeah.
So instead of investing in your next company, they basically said, you're dead to me and you can't do anything else.
Right.
Silicon Valley, California did not support NDAs and non-competes. And that is why people said, okay, you're leaving me tomorrow. What, can I at least invest in your company?
Right.
And today, as a result, there is no Route 128. And in fact,
Mhm.
Boston has had to slowly and surely build up with biotech and other things the right to even be in the entrepreneurship conversation, which
Yep.
is so odd. And so you look at some markets where the early founders are not mentoring, are not being role models, are not paying it forward. And actually you say to them, hey, your ecosystem could disappear.
Right. So, what's the mindset shift that you think needs to happen? Because when we talk about the level of collaboration that happens in California, I think we don't have to look too far outside of the United States to see ecosystems that are not yet operating with that kind of collaboration. What do you think the mindset shift should be for cities that want to be more entrepreneurial? Like what needs to change, right? Like obviously, like we've shared here, the non-competes are not great. That's not really supportive of innovation and the growth of these entrepreneurial communities. Yet people are afraid, right? That's why they do it. They don't want to, they're like, oh, I'm going to lose money, or I'm going to lose, an edge to a competitor. There's fear that's holding people back or organizations back.
And I also think people don't want to be finger wagged and told what to do. Oh, you're supposed to give back. So we're trying to change the language of success and make it actually competitive, because entrepreneurs are by nature competitive and fun and have FOMO. And so Endeavor is working with one of our own entrepreneurs, Globant, which is a public company that does digital transformation on an Endeavor multiplier effect app, where entrepreneurs can go in and get their multiplier score and actually start seeing whose bubble is bigger, whose multiplier score is greater.
Yeah.
Right. And to take pride not only in the company and the jobs that they themselves have created, but how many people they spawned. And let's go back to the beginning of this conversation. What did you say to me? You said, Linda, I don't know if you know how many people who worked for Endeavor, that this was a transformational part of our life.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm hearing from entrepreneurs. They don't even know that founders of companies they've heard of started in their companies sometimes.
Yes.
And so they want, for them, it's now a source of pride that, wow, that person first got their start in my company, and now look at them.
Yeah.
And I think if we sort of change that mindset, and I think now when you're also looking at countries, we just launched in places like Ukraine and Poland, and putting these on the map in terms of entrepreneurship is a source of national pride, right? Because cities like Dubai and Singapore and Sao Paulo, right, that are up and coming. And so we're saying, hey, look, it's not just about you and your company. It's about your city. It's about your community getting the know-how and realizing that it's not fear. It's about growing the pie.
Yes.
It's about, I think this is what Argentina, back to our earliest country, did well. They said, we're only going to do well if we get together and realize we're building the ecosystem together. And sometimes this means you poach my CTO and I poach your CFO, and we have to be okay with it. Yeah. But we're going to be able to attract people from all over the world if we create a place where people want to be.
Yeah. And it makes you have to be more competitive and connect with your team and provide, a good challenge. So I think it really does enrich the ecosystem as a whole, because competition is good for that.
Yeah. And right. Just as the best tennis players will say, playing against the most competitive tennis players makes their game better.
Exactly.
That's how entrepreneurs think about it.
Okay. So we have a couple of minutes, and I would love to do a lightning round if you're up for it.
Of course.
Okay. So who do you call when you're stuck?
I probably call my husband. He is a storyteller by nature. And so much, I think, of getting unstuck is figuring out the story you want to tell. And so that's who I would call.
Secret talent.
I used to be able to tango. I make a very mean pesto pasta that I learned from a contessa in Italy.
Ooh. A favorite memory.
Well, I would say last year, we have this Endeavor Gala every December. It's the one time of year where it's sort of like a traditional New York nonprofit. We're not a traditional organization, right? We're this hybrid organization, but every year we do this gala. And my daughters have come every year since they were 2. But it was one's an art historian, one's a poet playwright. They don't really have that much to do with entrepreneurship. Last year, they were sophomores in college, and they each brought a friend. And suddenly Endeavor was cool because their friends were interested. So to see their view change of this organization that they grew up with, but to see it through their friends' eyes and shift how they perceived, that's great.
Best compliment you ever got?
Well, I have to say that I was crazy, right? That's my whole theory, that crazy is a compliment. And that if you're not being called crazy when you're starting something big, then you're not thinking big enough. And today, like now, people said the Vision 2035 was crazy. I'm like, okay, good.
Good. We're on track. A skill you're working on.
I am working on letting go as a parent. That's one thing. I am working on understanding how to where and when to use AI. Everyone has to work on this. It's a journey. And then I'm sorry, but
Mhm.
I was working on something and back to my husband, who's like, "You chat GPT'd this, didn't you?"
You
I'm like,
can
"What?"
tell.
You can tell.
You can tell.
You can tell.
Yeah, it's like a little cringy.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you
Well,
get
this
an
is
email.
just what?
If you get like I've gotten an email
Oh,
where
I would not do emails.
it was
I
like
know.
really extensive and very
Yes.
explainy. And I was like, I will sometimes use it to get ideas on how to better rephrase something, but I
Right.
will never copy paste it. It's like, okay,
No.
I'm now going to put this into my own words because my therapist, ChatGPT, helped me think through my thoughts, basically.
But the email thing is a total giveaway because if they respond to every single thing you've mentioned,
You're like,
it's
no,
not that.
no,
Yeah.
no. Okay, this one's a little different. Worst advice you've ever gotten.
Worst advice is ignore your strengths, bolster your weaknesses. I thought I had to teach myself accounting and deep finance and I realized, no, you strengthen your T and you can, and you can find people surrounding you who complement you, but why try to homogenize everything you do? Focus on your strengths.
Beautiful. This has been amazing.
Oh, I
Oh,
have one
yeah.
other bad advice.
Okay.
This is fun. Keep every door open.
Oh,
Paralyzes you. Close doors. Close doors.
that's like a cliffhanger.
Yeah, I had friends even in law school they'd keep every door open and they kept none open. Then they never ended up pursuing, they are like, "Oh, I'm going to take the finance job and then I'm going to be the professional chef." Nope, never. They ended up they thought they deluded themselves that they were keeping the door open. They weren't. And I think if they had actually said, "You know what? I'm not going to go this path. I'm going to try this other one."
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, then I'll fall back. I think you've got to tell yourself, no, I'm going to take the leap. I'm going to close the door, at least for now.
Yeah.
Or you paralyze yourself and you don't really.
Absolutely. So good.
forward.
Okay. So before we wrap up, how should people contact you or learn more about Endeavor? Where should they reach out to?
Endeavor.org. I am on LinkedIn. So Linda Rottenberg on LinkedIn. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for making the time for this to happen. It's been an absolute pleasure.
This was a pleasure. And I'm so happy that you became a by 4 entrepreneurs. Our team as well. Amazing.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. And that wraps up another episode of the Founder Tactics podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And don't forget, if you want to get updates on new episodes, live recordings, and everything happening in our listener community, make sure to subscribe, follow, and rate the podcast on the platform you're on now. And to learn more about our work, including past interviews and live events, you can head over to foundertactics.com. We'll see you next time.